now we're ready. All right. My objective with this production is to explore and show people what it looks like to experiment as an entrepreneur in the world of social media content production, where the expectation is to be less polished than most attempt or try to produce for themselves. So, like, I'm incrementally investing in production value, and I'm investing in equipment and best practice and trying to put things together in a way that's professional, but I want to communicate with the world in a way that is as close to authentic with who I am as a person without a bunch of bullshit filtering. And just see if it's possible or prove how it's possible to build a brand without trying to convert with every interaction, and do so without filtering a lot of what is conventionally filtered about business owners or what they think they have to hide in order to be accepted. So, and to create a platform for me to learn and to help other people learn by talking to experts in all different kinds of things, and practical experts, people who run businesses, and just try to show what's practical. The model that I'm following for this is like a mixture of Joe Rogan. You familiar with his stuff? Joe Rogan is a MMA. He is the announcer for what is that called? UFC, the fighting stuff. And he is a master martial artist, and he does a really, really popular podcast. He does it like 4 times a week, and he interviews everyone. Actually, he'd be a great person for you to talk to. He does basically 2.5 hour long format, totally unscripted, non-agenda driven, person-to-person authentic interviews. So it's that plus the production value of Casey Neistat and a mix of Gary Vee with his emphasis on stop trying to create perfect shit, just document stuff. So that's what this is. So with the audience being business owners, I wanted to cover the one thing that I've had in my mind as a context this whole time is the manifestation formula. Business owners are trying to bring into manifestation some change in the world. I identify with business owners as being modern day philosophers, or the people who are taking on the greatest challenges, trying to solve problems. And so I'm exploring that world and trying to show people about it. So you're a business owner. That's a big part of it for me, which I know is something that you don't focus on a lot. You identify as a teacher. So I would love to hear about you as a business owner. And I was hoping you would also help me build a bit of a product by doing a guided meditation, if you're interested in that.
I haven't done that in a while. That's fine.
So that's it. So maybe introduce yourself for anyone who's listening. And
well, I guess I'll look at the cameras.
If you'd like.
I'm John Demartini. I travel the world teaching. I've been doing that this is going on my 45th year. And I love what I do. And I research and I write and I teach and I do whatever I can to help people understand and express their true magnificence. I believe that deep inside there's an extraordinary individual sitting there, and I believe that with the proper awareness and actions, they can bring that to the surface and make a vast difference in the world. And so I love doing that, traveling around the world, helping people do exactly that.
Doing seminars.
I do presentations or one-on-one consulting with people.
And you've built a business on that, like yourself. You're the CEO.
Well, I started speaking as a tutor, and I started speaking as a small business when I was by the time I was in my 20s. I did tutoring until about 23. And then I started to make a formal business out of it around the 23 mark, and it's never stopped. So I've been doing it all these years.
And you've run a chiropractic practice?
I was involved in the health field. I wanted to be a teacher, healer, and philosopher, and I chose chiropractic because of a philosophy. And I did well in that, but I taught, which is one of the keys in the way I spread my message, is doing radio and television and newspapers and magazines and speaking is the way I built my practice. So I did very well in that, and I sold that well, and I went further into consulting and speaking. I knew that. When I opened my practice, I told my assistant that we'd be doing this for 5 years, and 5 years later I'd be traveling around the world, and we pretty well did that. And today I'm just full-time research, write, travel, teach.
I want to go back to your chiropractic days, because you've told stories about how you had occupied a certain amount of office space, and you had empty office space next door that was not yours and not leased, but you chose to deliver seminars there.
You want that story?
I want you to tell that story and maybe tie in a lesson around how how that contributed to your success, the traits that you embodied that led you to do that, and maybe where you've been able to apply that in other areas to achieve business success in a way that's unconventional.
Well, in 1982, I opened up my practice. By the time 9 months into practice, my volume had grown. And I really was wishing I could have some more space. And there was a place next door to us that was having difficulty. And they came by and said that they can't fulfill their lease. Would I like their lease? And I said, yes. And so I expanded my office 9 months after I opened it to a little 2,100 square foot office from about 1,000, just under 1,000 square foot. And that was great. And then my practice grew further, and I was speaking as a way of doing that. And that was my primary vehicle, is to network and speak. And I was having classes each night, and sometimes the reception room that would hold maybe 25 people would be overfilled. So I ended up opening the door and putting speakers outside first, outside in the kind of the over-awning sidewalk. And I could then hold about 40 people, but I was getting numbers that were bigger than that. And I didn't want to go away from my office to do these talks, because them touring the office was part of the growing process. So I was thinking, what do I do? I don't want to go out, but I need some space. And I thought, well, I could just do it outdoors, but the temperature and weather was not always right. And I was doing these regularly. And then all of a sudden, about 8, 9 months into the practice again, so now we're 18 months in practice, there was a big boot center, a 3,000 square foot boot center, that mysteriously on a weekend disappeared. Just took everything and disappeared on a weekend.
Midnight move?
Yeah, they just moved. From Friday they were there, Monday they were gone. Mm-hmm. And I noticed it. I mean, they literally took everything. The sign, everything. That was up mounted, everything. It just disappeared. And I thought, I looked in the space, and I just damaged the carpet a bit and a couple walls, but I thought this would be a perfect lecture hall. I was almost feeling like there was some sort of higher order going on here, and I thought this is a perfect lecture hall. So I called the leasing company, and I said that I'd like to speak with somebody about leasing that space. Well, they didn't get back to me. And I was having a class, and it looked like I was going to be full again, and I was going to run into a problem if I either have to curtail the growth of that class or maybe use that space. So I called them to try to see if I could get that space and negotiate with them a full-time lease on the space, but they never got back. So I knew that I was willing to pay. I knew they would want somebody to pay. I knew that that would be a pleasing thing for the people who left if I took it over. That would be less litigation there. So I had everything in my ballpark, you might say. And finally, because they never got back to me, I decided I'm going to get a locksmith to open it up. And I got a locksmith to open it up, and I went in there and repaired the carpet really quickly, in a day, and put some mural on this one wall that would need repair. Got 60 chairs brought over, and a friend of mine who had Infinite Video Productions was videoing. I said, look, would you like to video our talk tonight? And he goes, absolutely, because in front of all the people that you might pick up business. I got some plants, and I got this lectern, and I did my presentation. And I was able to handle more people, and because I had opened that doorway, and psychology-wise, I think I drew more people, so I got a bigger audience. Then I decided that instead of going out from one place to the other, I would just cut a wall through one of my offices. So I literally got a guy to cut a wall through there and repair it, fix it all up.
Yeah, like a doorway.
a wide doorway, like a big hallway. And now I have to open up. I had 5,000 square feet now. And so I set aside the rent and the expenses and everything else that would be involved in paying it, and just set it aside, knowing that they're going to eventually probably ask me to pay the rent.
Okay, so you're using it and then carving out the cash.
Carving out the cash for it, knowing that if they did, all they're going to do is what? Be upset?
We can pay our bill. Okay.
Upset, you know. I figured it wasn't really a major risk. And the worst thing I could do is close it back up at my expense and everything's back to normal. And I was growing and my practice volume went up. And so the back half of that 3,000 square foot, I put another wall in, and I turned into another 12 treatment rooms and in an area for type of therapies and things. And I was doing construction, and while I was doing construction, the leasing agent showed up. And he didn't know what to say. He was like, came in and go, "What, who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you doing?" And I asked him to please move because I got some sheetrock coming through. And he was the middleman. He wasn't a leading guy. And he was irate, and he was saying, "Well, you can't do this." And I'm going, "I'm doing it." And he walked away. And then about 2 weeks later, I'm just finishing, everything's finished. I'm putting in some plants. I'm just finishing everything out. Really fixed up the place. And there was a guy named Lenny Friedman who was about 6 foot something, standing in this kind of central pathway of the halls. And I come out of my adjusting room and I see this guy there. And he had more presence in that space than I did. And I had this sense that this is the guy that owns the place.
He owns the place.
Yeah, I could tell that because I just had this sense. And I said, "Hi, how can I help you?" And he says, "I'm Lenny Friedman, Core Management Company. You must be Dr. Demartini." I said, "I am." And he said, "I like what you've done here." And I said, "Thank you." I smiled because I knew he's got to see this, because it's probably a strange thing for him.
Yeah.
And he said, "I'll tell you what, I want you to come down to the headquarters, which is a big, tall building, and discuss what you're doing here, and let's see if we come up with something we're both winning." Very lovely. First-class guy. The middle guy was, emotional reaction because he looked at his job as jeopardized. And then I went down there, and I was blown away. I was really surprised. Lenny said to me, the first thing, he had 3 or 4 guys around a table, and we had this dinner brought in, a lunch brought in. And he said, "First thing I want to say is you remind me of me when I was younger." And I said, "Great," because he was about twice my age. And I said, "That's great." And he says, "I want to know what your dreams are. I want to know what your goals are, because I might be able to help you open up franchises and things." And so I told him everything I was wanting to do. And at the end he said, "I'll tell you what, I also want to offer you this. I want to offer you a job in my company. I'll pay you $250,000 if you'll come and work here, because I need a guy like you that has foresight to do things and takes risks and makes things happen." And I was pretty pleased with that, but at the time I knew I was going to be making more than that. I didn't want to work for somebody else, and that was not really enough. He just said maybe $1 million, I might have thought about it differently. But at the time, $250,000 wasn't really enough for me to make that kind of thing. And I knew what my long-term vision was, and that was not what I wanted to do. But it was still a taste. And it made me feel that I was valuable. Well, he ended up giving me 6 months free rent, even though I'd already been in there for a while, and helped me build out anything else that I needed at no cost. He was absolutely lovely because he thought if this guy is going to keep franchising, he's going to end up in my places.
He needs more offices.
He's going to need more spaces. So he was thinking long-term too. And so that went on for, I guess, a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, almost 3 years, something like that. And then I filled it up. I did classes, and what was really fun about that is there was a big giant cinema, 10 cinema complex adjacent to my center. And there were 1,000 cars in there, about 1,000 cars in that parking lot, because 10 cinema complex has hundreds of people, and there's just cars everywhere. And I had a mentor when I was much younger named Robert Schuller. And Robert Schuller created what is called the Hour of Power Tower, and a very interesting television series. And he was a minister. And I always remembered him because he inspired me when I was much younger. And So what I did is I ended up putting giant megaphones outside for my lecture hall, where you could hear them literally across the parking lot. And this is like a good ways. This is a big parking lot. So I made sure, even unless it was a really windy day and howling, you could hear, the entire parking lot could hear me lecturing. And then I got these you know how when you got a new building and it lights up in the sky and these big lights?
Yep. So
I got these lights to rented them out for a period of time just to make it go, what's going on?
Yeah.
And took a pole and put some streamers in there so it looked like there was something new and everything else. And people couldn't miss it because they'd see the lights, and everybody was looking in and pulling in to find out what's going on. And I was doing my lectures, and we had this filming crew, and people always want to know, they're always drawn by a filming crew.
Yeah.
It's like being in the movies or something.
Everyone either loves or hates a camera.
Yeah. And so what was happening is people were getting out of the movies after the matinee at 7 something, and I started at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock teaching. At 7 o'clock they're coming out, and the others are coming in for 7:15 to 7:30 movies. And they would get in their cars and they would pull up and roll down the windows, and they could hear the megaphones. And I was filling up the parking lot, not the whole parking lot, but filling up an area of the parking lot. We'd have sometimes 50, 60 cars in there, maybe more, that would just park and listen into my lecture. And then they would come in, and we would have a Marantz tape recorder, and we were, in those days, audio cassette tapes, and we were recording every talk. So we would guarantee that we would make enough money off that to cover all the cost. And people would buy back-ordered or the previous presentations. And I had a nice little business selling audio cassette tapes, live and previous ones. And I was bundling them up in different types of bundles. And people would come in and do that, and I grew my business. And that was great marketing. I mean, what I did is at the end of my talk, I would do a tour of the office, and I would do an exam on somebody and show them what we do.
Yeah.
And I really did well. We were having 100 patients a month coming in from that alone. And then I had this inspired vision in a meditation that I did not too far into that, about 2.5 to 3 years in. On an October, I remember, I went up to my house that was nearby, went there for lunch, had a sandwich, and got an inspired vision about a new office. I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't something I was planning. It's just this really beautiful new office appeared to me in this tall, high-rise building that they just finished in Houston. And I came, and I remember yelling down from upstairs where I was meditating. I told my wife at the time, I said, I just saw my new office. And she came up and she said, what are you talking about? You just expanded the other one. I said, I just saw a new one, and it's tears of inspiration, and I know that I must follow that. And she thought, well, that's kind of odd that you just expanded, now you're talking about another office. So that was on a Tuesday. And on a Thursday, I went back to the office. I told the doctors, I had 5 doctors working for me by then. And I told them that I was going to be selling this, and I was going to be getting a new office. And I hadn't even seen the other office, except in my mind. And they were like puzzled and actually anxious, because they're going, so we're not going to have a job here? What's going to happen here? I said, I just know that I have to follow my inspirations, and when I get clear, lucid visions like that, I have to follow them. So I drove down to the building that I saw this vision in, parked, came in, asked where do I go to talk to the leasing agent, went up to the 49th floor, met with a lady named Jeannie Flansburgh, and I asked if there was any vacant space to lease. And she said yes, and I envisioned the 52nd floor. I love 7s. And she said, there's only 2 floors that have vacancies. One of them is 52, one's 58. And I said, I need to see 52. What kind of company do you have? I said, well, I have a doctor's office and consulting a bit. He says, well, we don't have doctors in this building. All this building, which in that time was called Transco Energy Company, Transco building, and Transco Tower. And I said, she said, well, we don't have any doctors allowed in there. We don't want the liability of doctors. I said, well, what do you have here? She says, well, we have energy, oil, and money. I said, Jeannie, I have tons of energy. I'm slick as oil, and I got lots of money. I know I fit here. If I have to open up an oil company just to start in here, I'll do that, because I got an inspired vision here, and she thought I was a little weird. No. I said, so I just want to know if I can at least look at the space. So I went in there, and she showed me the space. Walked in, and it was the space in my mind. It was tear-jerkingly, I don't know how to describe it. It was a lucid vision of what I saw, and I saw that position. And I came there and I looked out of the window and I got tears in my eyes and I said, this is my space. Whatever it takes to get this space, I want to find out what it takes. And she looked at me and she saw a tear in my eye. And she said, you know, Dr. Demartini, I'm actually beginning to believe you. Because the way you describe this seems to be the space. So we went downstairs. She went and talked to Gerald E. Hines, who was managing the building. And I went over to the architect's office, which is there on the 49th. And I told him what space I had. I had it in my mind. I already saw what I wanted to build. And he said, well, I don't know if you can do that because you're taking all the peripheral windows in the interior we're not using. I said, well, she's making special arrangement with Gerald Hines. And he goes, well, I don't know, I have to get authorization like this. I said, okay. She came out and she said, well, if you have 3 years tax returns, your profit and loss statements, your history of your company, we'll look at it. In other words, kind of bug off, but we'll look at it. Well, that was Thursday, and Tuesday I came in on a cold day with a coat on. I came in and I handed her the entire portfolio. And she said, you know, Dr. Demartini, I didn't know for sure if you were coming back. But I told her, I said, I'm like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm the Terminator. I'm back. And she said, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine, and they said that they recognize your name. Are you the one that has that TV show on Channel 2020, I mean? And I said, yes. And she goes, I think we could use you in the building because the energy and oil energy is down right now. We need somebody that's uplifting like that. And what you're doing, from what I hear, you know, you're a pretty outrageously assertive guy. And I said, yeah. I said, so I'm batting for you. I'm going to get you in here somehow. Well, the following Thursday at 4:30 in the afternoon, I got a call from Jeannie and said, welcome to Transco Tower. I've been the only doctor in that building for 31 years. They've never let another doctor in there. But it goes to show you that if your certainty exceeds others, it can take you farther than what you first might think. And if your clarity exceeds people's obstacles, you can override people's resistance. So I think that was a principle that was being displayed there. Now, I moved into that office a very short period of time. They built it out, did it by specs. It's beautiful. I've been there. You've been to my office. And I've been there 31 years. And I am grateful I did. And I sold my first practice to some doctors, those doctors that were working for me. And I became financially well off as a result of that. And I opened up a second practice, working part-time and doing consulting and speaking more full-time. And I knew I was going to be weaning one into the other. And I started more officially speaking, primarily in health field, to health professionals, but then gradually going from that into peripheral ancillary health industries. So I started in the chiropractic and I went into podiatry and dentistry and medical and started doing things on practice building. Because people go, whatever you do, it worked. You know how to build a practice. And then I did consulting and speaking to health professionals. And I did probably 1,000 clinics that I helped grow practices over the next few years until around 1990. And in 1990, I ended up full-time practicing, or full-time speaking instead of practicing. And I weaned off the practice. And then one of the doctors that was with the original clinic, I negotiated a deal that wherever I was in the world that I would refer patients to his clinic, that he would give me a 25% of whatever I referred, which was actually a good return. Mm-hmm. And so I was referring him patients and generating a passive income from that. And I was now consulting and speaking and growing a nice income from that. And my business of professional speaking expanded. And it first was, by 1984, I had my first international speech. And by 1990, I was speaking throughout Europe, United States, Canada, and it kept growing. And now I get to be all over the world. 350
days a year?
Well, I'm full-time, I really full-time travel. 365 days a year I'm traveling. Yeah. And I'm either researching, writing, traveling, or teaching every day.
Can you just check and make sure audio is going for all this?
And also, I didn't think to get you got water here.
We got you water.
Okay, good. You did.
Is that fireplace too hot?
No, it's fine.
I think it's good, Jay.
No, you don't want to not have your fireplace on.
I can turn it down a little.
And our mics are picked up, right? You see my mic on that camera and his mic on that. Say something, John. Yeah, okay. I'm like sitting there realizing I didn't check any of this stuff.
Started right in.
Yeah, like my mic there. Now I'm on.
But you were on one of them?
Yeah, we're good. So you can disassemble that story into so many different lessons from my perspective. You talked about I'll just go through my short list. Business owners today commonly believe speaking and teaching is the way for them to grow their business. There's like an onslaught of people building curriculums or calling themselves speakers and coaches. That is prolific. Everybody's doing it. There's the concept that, take a risk when something's important and ask for forgiveness later, right? But be prepared. There's the lesson about, you mentioned at the end, when your certainty exceeds others, that you become the leader or you're able to transcend obstacles. You very casually talk about how your ability to broadcast your voice into the unknown somehow magnetically attracted clients, which today I would see an equivalent being something like this, right? Just broadcasting a voice into the social world and seeing who pulls up in their car in the parking lot.
Yeah, well, it worked. It worked for Robert Schuller, so I figured it might work for me.
Yeah, and so then there's that whole, one of the things that I was hoping to find a way to dig into is the idea of first principles or universal principles, and how business, in one way, like in the story you told, it's a very pragmatic journey, right? I was just a chiropractor. You don't say it, but you are clearly good at your job because customers don't come back when people suck. So they're coming back and you're acquiring new customers and keeping them and expanding your practice. You jump past a lot of the challenges that a lot of business owners today really struggle with, which must have been tremendously harder back then too, right? Like there's no Facebook in the 80s for you to just go buy ad space on and tell people that you exist, right? So you have 5 employees and you clearly have your bookkeeping in order. You're able to turn around paperwork in 3 days.
Well, by the time we had the more expanded office, we had 5 doctors and 12 employees, so we grew a bit more. I found out that I had a funny thing happen. Maybe this will be useful. It's kind of funny. I had a PR company, J.J. Goldman and Company, and they assisted me on some of the media and some speaking engagements, mainly media. And I began the brand Demartini at the time. Mm-hmm. It's been with me since 82, 83. And I was going to a restaurant, Tuxedo Charlie's is the name of the restaurant, in a mall for lunch. It was nearby. And I was talking to them and they were asking me questions and I was quite enthusiastic. I was a kind of a hyper enthusiastic guy at the time. And we started a conversation and I guess I speak loud enough where people can hear. And so people in the restaurant started to just listen in and watch our dynamic. And I noticed that they were listening in, so I included them in the conversation and look at them and raise the voice a little bit more. And then this group and this group. And I noticed there were about 7, people at tables, 3 tables around us listening in. Yeah. And so I really started including them in, and then more people started listening, and I started to stand up. And J.J. Goldman and her husband were chuckling at how I just instantly engaged this group in this section of this restaurant. And I started speaking loud enough where the restaurant stopped. Waiters stopped. What's going on? They didn't know what it was. They thought there was some sort of a group function, and now the speaker's about to speak in their restaurant. They didn't have any problems with it. They didn't have any issues with it. They just assumed I brought all those people there. And I did this presentation on achievement and success. And
ad hoc.
Ad hoc. And at the end of it, I got an applause, and I got the owner of the restaurant came out, was watching, and said that was fantastic. And anytime you want to put on a function at this restaurant, we'll open the whole thing. He assumed that I had brought everybody there. And it was quite humorous. And he invited me to come and bring people there anytime or speak anytime there. So I ended up bringing my assistant there just to go there, not have a meeting, but just to go there. And I would do that. And then we'd have appointment book there. And we would pick up people for appointments because I would talk about stress and success and health issues and how it affects your health. And I would generate patients. Well, there was a lady there from another restaurant called La Peep Restaurant and La Quiche Restaurant. Both of them were there. And one of them came up to me and asked if you would like to come and do this at ours. This was entertaining and inspiring, and people seem to love it. You're welcome to do this anytime, because I thought they saw entertainment value out of it. So I got invited over to 2 other restaurants to go and do presentations. And I thought, I don't have to wait during the nighttime to try to get people into the talks. I could do a talk anytime, any place, anywhere. And that opened up a whole new marketing process. Besides radio and television and all the media, in my evening talks, I could just do a luncheon talk. And then I started inviting myself with my cards to anybody that would love to hear more, come up to me and we'll organize a deal for your organization and your companies, et cetera. So I started doing these talks at lunch and sometimes in the morning in breakfast clubs. And also I would do my talks in the evening. So I was talking sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. And that grew my practice. And a lot of people thought, well, I don't have the courage to do that. But that's okay. When I moved into my other building, my new building, my high-rise building, I was on the 52nd floor. Well, there's an express elevator up to the 51st floor. And then I go around another elevator, go up to my floor. And I noticed I came down that elevator one time, there's only one person on there, and they didn't talk, they just quiet, and they're over in the corner. And I thought, this is a marketing opportunity. So I went down and I held the door and waited till it filled up. I just let the whole thing fill up. And I got on and I started speaking to 20 people on an elevator. And you've been in that elevator, you know what I'm talking about. And I became known as the elevator seminar guy. And there was a guy named Sandy Vilas who happened to be in that elevator who wrote a book called Power Networking. And in the book, he talked about meeting this guy in the elevator doing seminars. And he thought it was a funny thing. And he ended up coming as a client. And he and Thomas Leonard founded the entire coaching service across America because of that. They literally came to a talk that I did, and we did work, and we helped them design the Coaching USA and Coachville, which is the first coaching companies that really launched coaching in America. That all came from an elevator seminar that I did, a 28-second elevator pitch that I did, and I would go and ride down again, fill up another elevator, and do it again. I had 5,000 people in that building and moving in and out of that building. I got to know everybody, and people would sometimes wait, I'm not riding again, joking with it. But I ended up with 40 new patients in 1 month doing elevator seminars. So yeah, I found that many people are afraid to do things. They're worried about what people think of them. And I was a man on a mission, and I was interested in serving people. I wasn't interested in what people thought about me as much as I want to make a difference in people's lives. I want to serve people. And so those opportunities. Then I went into the mall and I introduced myself to everybody in the mall. And I memorized their name as I was introducing myself. And I said, you probably know so-and-so from this area. And they go, yeah, I know that person in this department. I just saw him today. Well, they assumed it was in my practice. But it was me walking around the mall that I saw them.
Right.
So they got the impression that they all coming to see me, and that started leveraging it.
They're all filling in the blanks.
And they all started coming as patients. And so I got creative ways of exposing myself through networking and speaking to grow my practice. I didn't have any fear of growing a practice. I knew I could do that, and I could show other doctors how to do it.
So let's talk about certainty, because the only reason you're able to do any of that is because you had less fear than the people who don't. Right? And you had a certainty in your message, and you knew what you were working on. You had clarity of vision. There's a whole list of criteria that come together that really all have to be there for maybe not for you, but probably, and in my experience, for people to be willing to step out and take that risk or that perceived risk. So we haven't talked about values. John is an expert in values. You have developed a process called the value determination exercise, which is available on your website, which I'll link with this video. Walk us through, or take us through I'll give you like a time, because I know that you can expand this to meet certain criteria. or maybe not, let's dive into values. Talk a bit about how business owners love to work, right? They love to, I'll speak for myself. A strategy for me to avoid dealing with my emotions is to go do work, right? And I think business owners start businesses with a certain level of awareness, and they reach a Peter's principle, and many owners get stuck at a certain level in their experience, and maybe are overwhelmed by certain types of challenges, or stop working on themselves in a way that would really truly activate their potential. They smother high priority activities like strategic planning, or they don't allocate time to personal development, or they don't see a practical translation of spiritual principles as having a material outcome on their real life, right? Why would I meditate if I need those 15 minutes to put out fires in my business? Why should I take 3 days and master plan and clarify my vision? What is the value in thinking and affirming and doing those things in a way that is spiritually congruent with who they are teleologically speaking? Can you maybe dive into some of those ideas in a way that's different than you normally do? Like, I want to give you permission to step up above public talk level and complexity a little and let the audience figure things out.
Well, we have in our brain, the forebrain that is associated with foresight, and the hindbrain, which is hindsight. So there's literally a reflection of that.
And you mean physiologically the front and back of the brain also?
Yeah, the back of the brain would be not just the back of the skull, but down into the spinal cord, towards the spinal cord, the brain stem, etc. The hindbrain is involved in what is called telenomics, and it learns through trial and error. So it learns from doing it and then having reflexes responding to it next time. And the foresight is actually thinking things out with strategic planning and seeing it in your mind's eye and coming up with what are all the possible things that could go wrong, and how do you mitigate those risks, and how do you take actions and contingency plans to solve those. And so there's no doubt that having foresight is more efficient and effective at achieving things than hindsight only. Not that hindsight isn't also going to be helpful, but foresight with mentorship, people have already done it, foresight with thinking things out and planning. Alec McKinsey in his Time Trap book showed that people at the very top of the game in business do more foresighting and planning and delegating and less action than people who are at the bottom of the game, who are doing more action and don't have time for delegation or planning. So it's to our benefit to take the time to do that, because it repositions us. And how that's so is because each person lives by a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most important to least important in their life. And if they have a value on building business, if they do, then the priorities in their life will be business directive. And so if we sit down and ask ourselves, what are the highest priority actions we can do today that will create the greatest productivity, greatest profitability, greatest meaning in our lives, and literally outline what those are and stick to the highest priority actions. What happens whenever we're living by highest values, highest priorities, the blood and glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain, and the forebrain, the medial prefrontal cortex, gets the blood, and it starts to function, and it's involved in inspired vision, strategic planning, executing the plans, and self-governance. Mastery. So the second you prioritize your life, you get the benefits of not only living by priority, which makes your self-worth go up, and you tend to get more accomplished, and you're getting the most important things accomplished at the end of the day. But you also activate the brain that foresees things, so it's more efficient, and it actually can mitigate things in advance, and it can basically see what to do next in line. So it can add to the catalyzing, momentum building of prioritization. So anytime we can prioritize our daily actions, it's to our advantage. If we don't fill our day with high priority actions that inspire us and that have deep meaning, that are the most productive things, our days fill up with low priority distractions. Almost any business entrepreneur knows that when they have idle time, strange stuff fits in. Salespeople come in, things break down, entropy takes over anything that's not negentropically structured. And there's a reason for that. And the reason why people, you made a comment just a moment ago, the perfect comment, that when I get emotional, I just go to work. Well, in fact, if you do not go out and do a service and do something that is meaningful, you are designed to end up emotional. So that's a feedback that your body is giving you over time to go focus on working and do something that you feel wise about, and you don't get focused on your emotions. Because whenever you're in the forebrain, you're not in the emotional center, you're in the reasoning center. And you're in prioritization, and you'll end up getting things done. But if not, you'll go into the emotional amygdala, and you'll avoid pain and seek pleasure, and that's not the most productive action. Seeking only pleasure is going the path of ease, and actually mastering business is about tackling the highest priority challenges on a daily basis that are meaningful, and solving those, and whoever solves the greatest problems most efficiently leads. So it's to our advantage to prioritize on a daily basis. Alec McKinsey in his time trap showed how important that was. I started doing that when I was about 28, and it made a huge difference. It allowed me to excel. So every day you ask, what are the highest priority actions I can do today that can help me fulfill my mission and my business on it? Your highest value is your purpose and mission also. So people that have a mission are less affected by support or challenge, praise or reprimand, or all the emotions that most people get caught in. I believe because I've had a mission since I was 17, 18, and I had a mission to be a teacher, healer, and philosopher, I just kept pursuing that, and I think that allows me not to worry about what people think about me. I'd rather have the whole world against me than my own soul, as I've said. So I always say that the voice and the vision on the inside, when it's louder and more profound than all opinions on the outside, you master your life. And that's what happens when you live by priority. You get to get the opportunity to not get distracted by outer environmental injunctions and injections of other people's values and expectations, and you get to stay on the focus. And at the end of the day, you're thankful. And when you're thankful, you have a higher probability of staying in your amygdala, out of your amygdala and into your executive center. So you actually catalyze a virtuous cycle of momentum building and growth of business.
So it's a practice. It's like you said, momentum. It's something that one must learn how to do and is intrinsically tied to, like you say the word priority, for example. And I know a lot of people listening to this, or a lot of business owners who are perceiving themselves as challenged or overwhelmed, will say, okay, well, I am prioritizing. And they've mixed in the authority figures and they've subordinated to what they think their priorities should be. So there's a need, I think, to make specific that the word priority implies an awareness of that individual's most meaningful actions, right? So there is no objective priority. There is only the subjective priority for that individual who has that hierarchy of values, where there's activities that are most meaningful and important. The other thing you mentioned was that in applying a sense of prioritization and then acting according to that, you create a momentum that allows you to, there's a feedback loop that happens there. There's also a feedback loop that happens when the amygdala activates and you move into the emotional reaction cycle. So it's like you have to step out of one feedback loop into the other, and there appears to be, at least for me, and I'm sure this is common for most people, that those systems are at war, right? One of them can be nurtured and the other can be equally nurtured, and we're choosing to do that, essentially. Consciously or unconsciously, each day we wake up and decide, I'm going to engage in the practices and the disciplines that I know will assist in the activation of those forward thinking and strategic actions in my life, right? So one of the ways that people can do that is by dissolving their subordination to an authority figure by way of the Demartini method, really, which is a framework that enables people to ask high quality questions and train their intuition into the practice of stepping out of those emotional states by transcending their imbalanced perceptions. I apply that method, did so today actually, in fact, because of a trait that I was able to identify in someone that triggered me. And you also mentioned earlier in another story inspired purpose and meaning, and that you received insight through a meditation. So let's talk for a second about how a business owner can step out of the chaos in their day and build rituals or disciplines that would empower them to begin training the parts of their mind that maybe they've left neglected. Because I think a lot of people may not believe that something exists, that a spiritual practice exists that can lead to predictable outcomes. I think that there's a lot of bullshit around spirituality that distracts people from looking at spirituality like a system of thought that you can apply repeatedly to produce a predictable outcome. For example, mission-based activities that lead one to take risks and challenges that are inspiring and attract others magnetically to help them grow their business. Like there's a function at work there, right? So, there's all kinds of disciplines. Do you want to talk about how one can apply the discipline of so I would love to know, for example, lots of people do meditation and they think they're practicing gratitude. Talk to us about some of the principles that will make meditation effective, make affirmation effective, make defining visions effective, because most will automatically think I need to build a positive vision, right? I need to build positive affirmations, or I'm trying to lead you into, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, you stacked up a lot of information and content there.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can sort through all that.
Okay.
First of all, a practical, pragmatic idea that I came up with to assist me 30-something years ago, about 34 years ago, was whenever I did feel overwhelmed, which I noticed occurred on average at least every quarter, sometimes more frequent, but I mean really significantly overwhelmed in every quarter.
Yeah.
Seemed like there was this waves coming in. I made a list of everything that was on my mind. Anything that was occupying space and time in my mind, I wrote it down, personal or professional. And I made an exhaustive list until everything was on there. Because a short pencil is better than a long memory. If we don't have it on paper, it's in our head. And we're running around with all the noise in the head.
And you're talking like pages, because I've done this exercise, the daily distraction resolution exercise.
Yes.
And I'm a quarterly individual, and I'm into 10 or 11 or 12, 13 pages by the time I'm done. You're not talking like a list on a page.
Well, in some cases, I've seen it as slow as one page, but I've seen it sometimes 3 or more pages. But what you do is you make a list of everything that's on your mind. Because a great percentage of what's on your mind is not today. And if you don't have a place to put it, you're storing it in your mind, thinking about it, mulling over it, when in actuality you need to be present today and have a system for that information. So I make a list of that. Then I ask, is there anything on this list that is dumpable, that I can't do anything about, that I'm carrying around, worrying about? And on occasion, 1 out of 100 things get dumped. Then I ask, where can I delegate this? Is there somebody in my life that I can delegate this to? And if so, who would it be? And then I go and if it's not something delegatable, it's me to do. And if so, when would I delegate it or when would I do it? On the last column, there's 5 columns. The distraction, the dump, the delegation, the do, and the date. Once I've got all that down on paper, and I've got exactly when I'm going to begin it on a date and who I'm going to be delegating it to, I then transpose that to daily to-do forms or some sort of system like it, or daily delegation forms where I'm going to be delegating to the appropriate people. And I put all that onto the appropriate pages and dates that this is all going to be delegated. And I discover that once I've done all that there's really only 3 things I need to do today. But I've been carrying 70 things in my head. And the only reason why people are overwhelmed and distracted, really, is that they've confused busyness with priority. Priority originally meant one thing.
Yeah. Hashtag hustle.
The one thing.
Yeah.
Today it's priorities. It became plural. And eventually became to-do lists and checklists and things. But the reality is that a priority is really what is the absolute most important thing I can be doing with this moment.
Right now.
This moment.
Yeah.
And so once I did this distraction resolution process, I got down to what was really important for the day, and then I prioritized them. And I found out that I wasn't overwhelmed. It was that I had not sorted through it in my mind. I really wasn't overwhelmed in reality. I had made it overwhelming because I was storing so much stuff that was future that I didn't have a system that had strategically thought of what I was going to do with it. And once I put that in place, I was fine. And then I put them into the appropriate delegations and to-dos and hand them out on the appropriate days. And then I'm on my way. And if I keep current with that, I'm not likely to get accumulation. What people do is they don't have a system in place to deal with the accumulation of information in their head. And they accumulate and they get overwhelmed. The second thing is that they have confused busyness with priority, and they're doing things, and they probably did what I did when I first started delegating. I was a inefficient delegator. I would hire somebody to save money, thinking I could get somebody to do it, that I could then have to train and micromanage, and then by the time I would do it, I could have done it myself, or the way I did it, it wasn't the way I wanted it, and all this other stuff, and it was seemingly costly to delegate. But true delegation does not cost. True delegation is finding somebody that has extremely high value on doing the thing that you want to delegate, that has an experience and are more competent than you at doing it, and they'll get it done more effectively than what you would be doing, and you could release it, and the freeing of that time allows you to go on to the highest priority things that actually produce the most income, which will then more than pay for it, so you can extract surplus labor value out of the job that they're doing now for you, and you're freed. Today I research, I write, I travel, I teach. The rest of it's been delegated out. And I delegate some of my writing, and I delegate some of my teaching, I delegate some of my research, and I delegate somebody else to drive. I don't drive, I haven't driven in 26 and a half years. Everything is delegated out to the best of my ability so I can get down to doing the thing that I do best and liberate myself from anything that devalues me and weighs me down and drains energy. Because anything that's not high in the values will automatically drain you. And anything that is highest on the value will energize you. You'll have more energy at the end of the day when you're doing the highest priority things than when you started. And you'll have no energy at the end of the day, or lower energy at the day, if you're doing lower priority things. So you cannot live an inspired life without delegation, because you'll be automatically forced to do low priority stuff.
According to your own sense of what's low priority.
Now, if you are working for somebody else, you would immediately probably pass in your mind the idea, well, what happens if what you're asked to do is not important to you? It's normal. It has nothing to do with what you have put on your plate. It's your perception of it. That's the greatest discovery that we really have, that William James in 1895 stated that the greatest discovery of his generation, human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. So you can take a job duty or a delegation from some authority, and instead of subordinating to them and feel like you have to do it because, oh my God, that's what you do or you'll lose your job, which is a very foolish perception. You might want to ask, how specifically is doing this action and mastering this action going to help me fulfill what's most meaningful to me? And link it.
Well, but John, then I can't use my victimhood as a strategy too.
Well, you say goodbye to victim of history, and you say hello to master of destiny. Because now you're doing things that is helping you get what you want. See, nobody goes to work for the sake of a company. They go to work for the sake of fulfilling what they value most. And if they don't see their job duties helping them fulfill what they value most, they're going to be non-engaged. They're going to be theory X people, as McGregor says, instead of theory Y people that are self-initiated. So it's not about what the job is, it's about how you perceive it and how well you linked it to what your highest values are. I can take a person in any job, and I can spend a few minutes with them and link the job duty that they hate the most and link it to their highest values and make them inspired by it and fully engaged in it. Or
in like 10 minutes.
In 10 or 15 minutes in some cases. Or I can go in there and I can prioritize it and then hire somebody to delegate it. I had a lady recently who said, oh, I would love to delegate it, but my company won't allow me to delegate. I said, there's no such thing. If you can go and produce more income by doing more of higher priority things, you can afford the delegation system. Once you can show that in your own dollar, you can then sell that to the other company and say, I'm going to make you more money if you let me do this. So there's no such thing as a company. You have to have a really dense manager who if he can show or she can show that they're going to increase the profit margin, he's going to look good. So if you can go and do higher priority things and make more productivity and delegate things, it's to your advantage to do so. Because otherwise you're draining yourself and you're not inspired by your career. If you feel you're doing your highest value in a job and you've linked it to your highest value, you feel that that this company is partly yours. You feel pride for that, an ownership of the company. And people that own the company treat the company different than people who work for a company. So it's to everybody's advantage to have people engaged in the company. By helping them see how the job duties they're doing is helping them fulfill their highest value. So either go and do what you love by delegating or go and love what you do by linking. This is what allows you to maximizing your performance and potential.
Right. So as a business owner, practical application could be, for example, that the business owner does a value determination process on themselves, begins to prioritize their daily actions and identify where they've been attempting to do daily activities or certain job responsibilities that are not congruent with them, and then begin the process of identifying, are these activities that I'd like to link to my own values and increase the probability of me doing, or would it be wiser for me to delegate this to an employee? And either they have an employee and they love it, it's already congruent. They have an employee who doesn't see it, and then the business owner can help them link it to their values.
That's an option.
Or they're going to hire somebody, which is to say that the most important criteria possible in any hiring process is actually to determine that this employee's values will be congruent with the job description and duties that we're asking them to fulfill.
Or the other way around, the job description will be congruent with the values that they hold.
Yes.
That's the allocation of job responsibilities can make a difference in productivity in a single employee,
Right.
or by the linking. And there's something that in delegation. At first, if you made a list of all the hierarchy of your values, and you made a list of all the job duties that you have, and you put them onto a scale of where they are in the priorities, delegation always moves from those that are lowest to those that are highest. And at the very top, you eventually duplicate yourself. So the highest mastery of delegation is the duplication of yourself. And now you have basically freed yourself up. That becomes franchise, or that becomes manager, or that becomes exit. There's many ways you can duplicate yourself. So mastering delegation is an absolutely essential component of the life cycle of a business. Somewhere during that business, you're going to have to master delegation.
And you mentioned earlier that there's two benefits to a delegation, and the first is the time it saves you. But often when you're first delegating as a business, so my experience with this is that I engage with a business owner who is they think they're delegating, but they've actually abdicated the responsibility for some outcome in their business to an individual that is not actually more accountable to it than they are, right? And my experience of that is the really common one is bookkeeping, right? A business owner is thinking, I just want to do my business. I want to just spend my money and hope we bill enough. And then at the end of the year, my bookkeeper is going to tell us good or bad, right? Do we owe tax money or not? But where I'd like to take this is the time recovery from a delegation is actually a tertiary benefit when we consider the quality or the return on quality of delegating to someone who's a master at what you've delegated is significantly higher than something you could have even achieved on your own, because it's not in your values, or else it wouldn't have been delegated.
Like in IT, in my case.
Sure, right? Well, and to someone who actually has a value on it, because there's lots of people in the marketplace, business owners who are confused like anyone else, who are selling something they themselves don't even value, right?
That happens a lot.
A lot. And so
the integrity of that is reflected in the overall outcome.
Exactly. And not necessarily even maliciously. They're not maliciously,
Conscious.
right? They're unconsciously trying to sell something unimportant and then unwittingly doing a bad job.
Unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of that right now. And so my experience of that is the exact opposite. I like to experiment. I'm doing this because I love to do this.
Well, in order to delegate, it's not about just dumping it to somebody. There's a system in place that is measurable. No accountability can occur without a measuring. And some people have called it different things, KPIs, functional statistics, whatever it is. But you have a feedback system. Now, some people have a time horizon that's a day, some people have a week, some people have a month, some people have longer. Finding the time horizon that the person you're delegating, because different job responsibilities in a factory may be a day-to-day, week-to-week project. Somebody in upper management may be month-to-month.
Right.
Finding the time horizon and the metrics that are appropriate to the delegation. So you get feedback on the results of that delegation, so you're not left in the dark, is essential.
An example, a data entry clerk entering invoices day by day into the accounting system versus the bookkeeper or chartered accountant who is executing on monthly reconciliations and payroll periods and that kind of stuff. That's what you mean by time horizon, right?
Well, not just that. It's not about what they're doing and how long it takes or how frequent they do it. It's how every human being has a time horizon, depending on what they're working on, that they can hold information in their brain. So I'll give you an example. The factory worker lives literally day to day. You give them a paycheck 2 weeks in advance. Most of the time that's spent before the time that 2 weeks is up.
Got it, yeah.
Because they're living day to day. They're immediate gratifying. They're in the amygdala many times. But by the time you go to a supervisor, it may be week to week. You may go to lower management, maybe month to month. By the time of middle management, you might be year to year. They can start thinking in terms of a whole year. They can plan out a whole year. They can think in terms of a whole year. The factory worker can't think of a year. If a CEO comes in and talks to a factory worker, here's where we're going to go for the year. They just think, oh, look, I just want to get my paycheck. I want to be able to buy my beer and watch the hockey tonight. They're thinking of immediate gratification. The CEO may be thinking in terms of a whole century. The visionary may be thinking in terms of a millennium. So you have the sage maybe even further. So the magnitude of space and time within the dominant thoughts of this person will determine where they play. And anytime you delegate beyond the time horizons people do, they will procrastinate until they get to that time before they act. So you have to find out what the time horizons, and I always say micromanage until you can macromanage and find out where that is. And then if they keep giving great results, you keep expanding the time horizons.
Work outward.
Work your way outward to it. So you don't guess, because if you just make an assumption and then you find out that that's not done, you react. So you need to metric it, and you need to do it based on the real time horizon, based on that person's competency. And Elliot Jacques in his Requisites Organization text, he talks about the time horizons. It's a worthy read for just that reason, and finding out what those are in people. Because if you can have a person that is absolutely magnificent at getting a job done, as long as you keep it within their time horizon, they'll get it done.
Right, it's like this deadline's in a week, they're good to go. The deadline's in a month.
If you tell them, I want by this quarter, next quarter, I want this done,
They'll procrastinate, and then it gets into a week and they're doing it.
Right, because they don't think in terms of longer term.
Right.
See, whenever you're living by your highest value, your space and time horizons grow because you achieve, and you have a tendency to want to achieve bigger things over time and space.
So you love teaching, you set a goal to teach, you achieve the goal to teach, the time horizon expands.
I can now start thinking of what is over the next 5 years, 10 years, 50 years,
Do it again,
100 years. I have a posthumous biography of 1,000 years.
And so that's the practice, is if your highest value is being a teacher, then that means saying no to all the bullshit in the day that isn't teaching, trusting the delegation systems you have in place to pick up on all of that.
And not rescuing.
And not rescuing people from your perception of their suffering.
Rescuing them is a spontaneous action when you've hired somebody that's less competent than you.
So you're really rescuing yourself.
You're rescuing everything that goes on in your life, in your physiology, is a feedback system to get you to live by your highest value, your telos. Everything in your business is a feedback mechanism to let you know you're not living by your highest priority. Every symptom in a business, I can trace it back. I can show how that is actually just a feedback system.
So then a business for the business owner is like a super cooker for that business owner to get clear on his priorities.
It's forcing them. But see, the immediate gratification costs you long-term vision. And the immediate gratification keeps you in the amygdala, not your foresight, to be able to get the feedback that it takes. The amygdala wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure. The foresight, medial prefrontal cortex, embraces pain and challenge in the pursuit. And you need the feedback that's painful in order to master your business. If you don't want to hear that, and you keep wanting the easy one and want to ignore that, you're actually going to interfere with your growth of your business.
So when I hear business owners use the words quickly, hurry, as fast as possible, cheap, like languages that would propose that they want something more quickly than they believe they deserve or can achieve or is reasonable, all of that is feedback that what they're attempting to do may not be congruent with their mission.
I wouldn't go that far, because there are some things that they have client bases that they have possibly oversold and they don't want to underdeliver.
So they have existing promises.
Yeah, so, see, the wisdom of metricing your feedback, and I did this when I was in practice. I would set a goal to have a certain number of patients and collections and new patients and patient visit averages and things of this nature. Anytime that goal was not achieved in the time frame that I set, I wanted to know. Anytime it was done before or after that, I wanted to get that feedback. Because if I set a goal that was done later than what I anticipated, then I exaggerated myself with pride when I set the goal. I wasn't authentic and I wasn't me. I was in a puffed up state.
Yeah.
A manic state makes you set too big a goal in too short a time frame to humble you. Pride before the fall, hubris. The second you set a goal that is, when you're down, you'll set a smaller goal out of anxiety And if you achieve it quicker than what you anticipated, that means you undervalued your goal. You could do more. And that makes you feel successful. So the setting too big a goal in too short a time frame makes you feel like a failure. Setting too small a goal in too long a time frame makes you feel like success. And both of those are feedback mechanisms, negative feedbacks, to try to get you to set real goals in real time. So getting the metrics is essential to be able to set real goals in real time. When you float a company, and you have a large company, one of the responsibilities you have after you float a company for a public company is to be able to run projections of where it's going to be and what your action steps are going to be. And if you exceed those, more people fund money. If you don't, people take out money.
Right.
And so the public governance is a feedback system to make sure you're setting real goals in real times, and you can't set real goals in real times unless you're in your executive center. So every symptom is trying to get you to your executive center. It's just a feedback system.
And to be true to what's real.
What to your mission.
Right.
So everything is trying to get people on a mission, not just an immediate gratifying passion. It's trying to get them on a mission.
So businesses, for business owners and for employees, are consciously created mastermind systems where in all directions, simultaneously and synchronistically, we're giving and receiving feedback so that all of us may become more refined in our pursuit.
Well, this is a philosophical question. It was called heterotelia in the study of psychology, but it is a philosophical question on whether or not we're doing that for others as much as they're doing it for us, and that there may be a higher overarching field of possibility or intelligence that's actually governing this system. It's a philosophical question, because when you start to look at an organization, when I consult with organizations, I can see things going on, these pairs of opposites and these feedback systems that they can't see because they're in it. And outside you can see it. And you can see how everything is actually guiding them, and none of them are conscious. There's a law in sociology, sociopolitical theory, called the Law of Eristic Escalation. And anytime a politician goes out with something that they think is going to bring greater order to a society, an equal and opposite balancing force comes out to counterbalance it, to create chaos. And anytime somebody tries to create chaos, an equal and opposite force of order comes in to try to neutralize the chaos. And in chaos theory, this is a normal understanding that we grow most at the border of order and chaos. So these pairs of opposites are inherent. Cooperation, competition are inherent in every organization. If you don't know that, and you're getting this feedback, and you have this fantasy of the amygdala that I want ease without difficulty, I want cooperation without competition, which is sold in the marketplace by consultants, fantasies, then you'll be vulnerable to people selling you a fantasy of you're going to get everybody peaceful and ordered, and you don't grow there. You grow at the border of comfort and uncomfort, and the border of chaos and order. So if you're growing, you're going to be escalating and scaling up, and you're going to have new chaos. You have to have both in order to maximize the growth of the business. So if you don't know how to handle that, and you don't expect that, and you've been taught fantasies, and your amygdala is running you, and you want immediate gratification, and you want to avoid the difficulties and not get the feedback, you're going to get all the chaos to eventually create distress to get you back to your highest value again, your mission again.
Yeah.
So everything is trying to work for a higher ordered state. Life itself and organization is negentropic, overriding entropy. The tendency to go to entropy is what our animal nature does, and our real human nature is trying to create negentropy, to try to bring order out of chaos.
Yesterday at your public talk, you said that individuals that choose not to put their lives to good use, meaning individuals who choose to pursue a hedonistic lifestyle or who choose not to make a pursuit of their teleologically driven purpose, suffer entropy. That the universe actually has an interest in reallocating the resources of their material form back into the economy of life to be put to work in an individual who will.
Yeah.
The same is true for a business. Your employees are going to come and go according to the business owner's ability to, with certainty, hold a vision that's inspiring and meaningful and teleologically driven.
Yeah, any organism, it's studied in ecology that any organism that's not fulfilling its mission self-destructs, so the atoms and molecules and biochemistry of that will undergo entropy, and so they will be used by those organisms they will. So we call that prey being eaten by predator.
Right.
The predator will come in and consume you because you're not efficient in the ecosystem. You'll get eaten, and then that will become used by another organism that is most efficient. And if that is not an efficient organism, another one will eat that. And so everything is moved to where it's most efficient. Maupertuis, the mathematician in the 1800s, wrote about this. And it's been shown as called the law of least action, or the law of maximum simplicity. Everything is striving for maximum efficiency. So whoever has the laws that govern this, aware in their brain and can apply them, and who's maximum efficient, is the one that ends up leading the game.
I want to talk about that to me makes my, like, so I see business owners as running these manifestation machines. Like, that's the point of this, right? I mean, there is no point really, because the point is to live according to an inspired purpose daily, right? I mean, right now is the moment where we're meant to be most prioritized, working on our most meaningful next action, right? So, in order to have the opportunity to engage in the fulfillment of our highest values, there must be an experience, right? We need life in order to do that. And so business owners have chosen to play a conscious part in that, right? That's what I see the difference being, is a business owner or an individual working to fulfill their mission has basically said, fine, I'm going to be driven towards my purpose one way or another. I may as well be conscious of it. And business owners, or entrepreneurs in particular, are the ones who are taking on greater degrees of challenge to do so. That to me, then, let me back that up. I see business owners as then moving necessarily into asking spiritual questions like, how do I transcend mechanically building my business? How do I transcend responding purely to my environment? When one way is to simply prioritize, and the other is to dissolve subordination to an authority and to just express oneself fully. But then there's the spiritual component, the actual component where there's properties in the universe that, I'm going to use language that is not totally true, but we attract to us opportunities, support, and challenge that I think you would say is divinely orchestrated. How does one spiritually, this is where I would love to walk through the manifestation formula. How does a business owner engage? They're already functional. How do we engage in applying a spiritual formula to increase the probability of manifesting what we teleologically desire each day?
Okay, before I answer that, what's popping in my head was something that I learned from a gentleman named Jim Parker. Jim Parker was a chiropractor, and he was one of the leading chiropractors in America. And he had a franchised practice, and then he opened up a college, just a university today. And he also had an educational Parker Seminars, which I was speaking at for 33 years. I've spoken at it. And I noticed something being in that seminar for 33 years, that there were technicians, there were managers, and there were visionaries. He called it the physical, the mental, and the spiritual plane. That's how he called it. The technicians at the conference, it's a big conference with thousands of doctors, the technicians were in there teaching you little technologies and how to do this and how to do that, and it was very practical. And they would have 50 to a few hundred people in their class, and then, or maybe 100 or two. Then there were the managers, and they would have 200 to 300 people in the class. And then there were people like myself that were the visionaries, and we would have thousands. I had 9,000 people sometime in the class. And so we would be speaking, and they would be drawn to us. And they would wonder, why is it that there would be more people in that class than these practical little things? And it reminds me of something I learned from years and years ago, when the why is big enough, the house take care of themselves. The why is the purpose. Mm-hmm. So we would talk about having something that's meaningful, that's inspiring to you, that you're dedicated to, that is authentic, that you're integral to, that you can't wait to get up in the morning and do, and people can't wait to get your service. And that's the fastest way to grow the business, because everybody wants that positioning, and anybody exemplifies that and has integrity there will automatically draw and magnetize people. That's why there were 9,000 people drawn to people that were coming from that perspective. And the other ones were struggling in their business and were barely making it. The middle ones were doing well, but they were managing it and doing it by willpower. And the others were inspired. So there's no doubt that being inspired about what you do is the difference between an investor and possibly Warren Buffett. He's an inspired man. He loves what he does. You can tell. By the time he was 11, he'd already read all the books in the Omaha, Nebraska library on wealth building. And he spends his day primarily just reading and researching and studying balance sheets on companies to do what he loves doing. He doesn't let anything else interfere with that. So he's demonstrating what I'm talking about. So the manifestation formula, now that I've said that, is a formula that I was gradually introduced to over a series of a 3-week period by a gentleman named Paul Bragg. It wasn't a formula then, it was just the ideas that I compiled into a formula. And the formula goes through a series of about 13 steps. And the first step is being clear about what your mission really is. What do you call the purpose? Now, there's a lot of cliches out there in the business world about, knowing your purpose and writing it up, and sometimes PR people write up a purpose and it sounds good, but that has no meaning.
No, none.
What matters is it's got to bring a tear of inspiration almost to your eye when you read it. It's got to be what you're dedicated to. See, I'm a teacher primarily because I was told I was never going to read, write, or communicate, never amount to thing, never go very far in life. And I had learning problems. I didn't read till I was 18 years old. And when I later discovered after meeting Paul Bragg that I could read and I could learn and I could overcome my learning problems, I've been on a mission all these years to do it. So this is not just something I picked out of the air. It's something that's deeply meaningful to me. And if it's not deeply meaningful what you're dedicating to in your business, you don't have the full capacities to do what it takes to do great business, as Jim Collins would say. You'll just do good business. So the first thing is identifying what you really, in your highest value, what are you really, 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 really going to work for? I met a guy that I consulted for in Melbourne, Australia, that owned a paper company and a forestry company to manufacture paper. And his business was going down. And I got consulting in there with McKinsey Corporation. He asked me to come in and help him. And it was really interesting because after chatting with him, he came up with all these excuses why he was losing market share. And I told him, I said, now that the bullshit's out of the way, let's find out what's really going on. What made you start this company? And he was shocked by that question. And he went back to a childhood positioning. When he was very young, there was a desegregation going on in the schooling systems where he was in Melbourne. And he was a poor, very poor child. His family was very poor. He got desegregated and moved into a very rich school. He was the only one that didn't have good holiday t-shirts and tennis shoes, didn't have pens and paper and pencils and things. And so he would stay at the end of the day and go to the trash cans and pull out paper that wasn't used and pencils that weren't used just so he could make his own pad of paper. And he would glue his own pad of paper at night so he wouldn't be humiliated in going to school and they wouldn't pick on him. And so he literally started making pads of paper while he was a child in elementary school. And that's the reason he started his thing. He said, I don't want anybody not to have a pad of paper. And when he started to share why he got into the business, he got teary-eyed. And the executives never heard the story. He'd gone so far, so many years into his business, he forgot what got him there. When he shared that story, tears came out of his eyes, and the guys around him really gave him a hug. And I said to him, did you let the kids down? You dropped the ball on the kids. And he cried. Yeah. And he really got to sense that the reason why he's in business, he forgot. He lost his why. And that's why he was down in his business. So we recaptured his why, his purpose in his business in that moment and got him in focus. And he was 63 years old and was thinking about leaving. But no, he reclaimed his mission and turned the company around. In a matter of months, he turned his company and took over the leadership role again. He took the market share. It had nothing to do with the world on the outside. It had everything to do with his world on the inside. So his starting point is purpose. When you have a high value and you're setting a goal that's aligned with the highest value, your brain and that executive center organizes. The way the prefrontal cortex is, it organizes the visual centers, the auditory centers, the feeling centers. It all organizes. It's like a conductor in a symphony, and you have a harmony and resonance instead of cacophony.
Like the sand that goes between order and disorder when you play different tones.
Exactly. Yeah. So what happens is you will automatically, your innermost dominant thought becomes your outermost tangible reality. You will automatically think about what's most important to you spontaneously. And if you have a goal that's congruent with that, you have congruency. And people can sense congruency. They have a natural bullshit meter that lets them know when they're doing business with that, and they automatically have a resistance about doing business with anybody that's not congruent. There's a natural thing, and it's a protective mechanism to people. It's inside them. It's an instinct. It automatically lets them know. They feel at ease when they're doing something that somebody's got integrity. We can all go into a restaurant knowing somebody loves doing it. Like the restaurant today, the guy that came today was not as inspiring as the guy yesterday, Danny. And Danny, I want to call on and make sure I got him as a waiter because he's inspired by doing that. And you can tell, and you draw business to you.
Yeah.
So by having your innermost dominant thought become your outermost tangible reality, by having it congruent with the highest value, your purpose, you automatically electrify the energy and your enthusiasm goes up, your inspiration goes up. And your executive center comes along and you see what you want to accomplish. You get a lucid vision. Those with a vision flourish and those without a vision perish. And you can articulate. The way you know you have a clear vision is you could articulate to somebody else the vision. And you could say it so clearly they can see it in their mind's eye and want to participate. That's a sign of a clear vision. So your left hemisphere with its auditory capacities, when you're congruent with your thoughts, you'll see it and can say it in a way where other people can see it and they want to participate. And you engage and enroll and literally create a following of people that want to participate. This is exactly how Harley-Davidson built their company, and it's an understanding of this. Once you have a clear purpose and you have a clear thought and clear vision and clear internal dialogue and ability to communicate it to your teams and the customer, what your really mission is, they can tell if it's authentic. The bullshit meter knows. And you will feel inspired, you'll feel grateful, you'll feel love for what you're doing. You'll get up in the morning and you won't say, I have to do this. You'll say, I love it. Like Bill Pollock, who owns Drake International, he said that 1951 is the last time I ever felt I had to go to work because I started my company and I love what I do every day. And that energy, that feeling of gratitude, love, inspiration, enthusiasm, you have more certainty, you have more presence. And people can tell when you're present or when you're in the future or past. And business is directed according to your presence. When you're working with a client, if they know you're present with them and really attentive to them, and there's nothing else in your mind except them, they want to do business with you. They can tell if you're distracted or if you're judging them or you're not present with them. And then what happens is you have a lucidness and you want to write things down. You love planning. You would spontaneously love to plan when you're congruent because you keep seeing a vision and you want to get it down and think about it and how you're going to do it before you lose that, right? Before you, oh, I got an inspiring vision. I want to get that down. So you write things down in space and time and see where you want to do it in a natural time horizon. And you can see and you have command over your space. You can see what you want to create in space. And you automatically want to act because you're enthused and you tend to want to act with the energy. And energy is infinite once you recognize the source. Once you're congruent, there's never lack of energy in people. And you automatically draw and resources into your life because you see it, you're attentive to it. Whenever you're living by your highest values, your awareness is at its maximum and you see opportunity and you have resources available to you. Because people will invest in people that are congruent. They'll invest. I want to be part of that.
All kinds of stuff.
Money, resources comes to a person that way. And they will automatically, because they're congruent, they'll tend to build momentum and achieve, and their self-worth goes up, and their deserve levels to attract more opportunities in their life goes up. And if they're thankful for what they get to do every day, they automatically manifest things. They manifest the outcome. I've been following that formula since I got it right to my 18th birthday. The last week before my 18th birthday, I got that. So I'm going on 63 now. So all those years, almost 45 years, I've been following that formula.
It definitely, when people have the courage to begin to honor what's most important to them, it's amazing to see what unfolds when they let off baggage and they restore integrity. And
when you respect your time, the people around you begin to respect your time. When you can say no to low priorities and say yes to high priorities, other people, when you tell them, thank you, but no thank you, I don't want to do something that's not going to be where my whole heart's into it, and that's not where my heart is, and I don't want you to get anything but the best, a response, and if my heart's not there, I don't want to do that. It's not fair to you. And they word it in a way where the other person wins because they've learned. People that are living by their highest values love assisting other people fulfilling theirs. You've seen this. When you meet people that are extraordinary and done extraordinary things, they're very gracious with helping other people. And people that are wanting to do it are opportunists more of the time. So you can see that there's a graceful energy about people that are doing great things. They have a tendency to want to assist society. And the greater the cause, the greater their outcome. So they have a tendency to want to make a difference That's our inner nature.
So I do everything I can to turn this into a practice. One of the systems that I have found that has helped me establish a cadence around applying some of these principles intentionally have been savers from the Morning Miracle, which is simply silent meditation, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading and scribing, writing. You deliver a program called Master Planning for Life, which is a 3-day program where you provide 2,000 questions that have helped me tremendously explore and to define and to articulate a vision for my life. I think that giving oneself permission to create the space to explore is critical. So I go to define my values, or I discover my values, and now it's time to articulate a vision, creating routines and systems in order to do that. It's not something you can just do once. Like you said, it's something you've done every day for 40 years or whatever it's been. Can we help? Can you do it? Can you give some information on how to take that concept of values or teleologically driven purpose and just give the audience some information on what that means in terms of defining an affirmation, having a clear vision, eliminating the fantasy and nightmare stuff?
Well, whenever we set a goal that is aligned with our highest value, we're willing to embrace, support, and challenge equally in the pursuit of it. I've said for nearly 40 years that let neither pleasure nor pain interfere with pursuit of purpose. Aristotle described hedonism, which is one form of happiness, and eudaimonia, which is another form. And he said hedonism is a transient, immediate gratifying state of pleasure seeking, which eventually creates big, great pains. And eudaimonia is the pursuit of meaning. And the distinction between animals and humans is one is pleasure-oriented, the animal, and the other is meaning-oriented. And Viktor Frankl described that when he was dealing with the concentration camps in his search of meaning. Man's search for meaning. And even Freud said there was pleasure, then there was, and Nietzsche said there was will, and then and Frankl says, or Aristotle says there's meaning. Meaning is more important, in my opinion. Filling your day with things that are meaningful is what engagement's about. So if you take a 12-year-old boy who loves video games and his highest value is the video games, he will endure whatever it takes to beat the game, and he'll figure it out. And then he'll go to his parents and find a way of buying a more advanced game that's more challenging. So people who are engaged in doing something that tie in their values pursue challenges that are inspiring to them. And people that are not engaged and not doing what their highest value is, they look for pleasures and support, but attract challenges that are uninspiring to them. That's called distress. The first one's called eustress. Mm-hmm. Eustress is wellness, the other one is illness. And when we're pursuing challenges that inspire us, we're more objective and resilient and adaptable to a changing environment, and we're more aware, more foresightful, and we're able to see things and embrace both pain and pleasure. And the goals we set are objective. Objectivity means even-mindedness, not positive or negative biases. So we set goals that are more balanced, and we're willing to mitigate risks and think them through and not impulsively jump on fantasies and impulses that, oh, well, this is going to make it. I think Jim Collins said something really nicely in one of his books, that most people in business, when they start out, they think, oh, this one thing is going to save the day. And he tries to emphasize that small incremental changes repeatedly done over time, over a 25-year, makes an overnight success. Mm-hmm. And it's the person who's willing to consistently refine and use their experiences as a refinement that builds great businesses, not the person that's impulsively trying to get immediate gratifying results. And so if you're setting a goal that is pleasure without pain, it's not a goal, it's a fantasy. And your brain is set up with a bullshit meter to know that you've got a fantasy, so it creates an anxiety and a fear to let you know it, because you haven't mitigated the risks. So the purpose of strategic planning is to mitigate the risks associated with a real goal, and to make sure you're not setting fantasies as objectives and making you set objective goals that are achievable and thinking of things out. Now, what I find is when I mitigate the risks and think things out and have contingency plans, I rarely have the problem. It usually goes through smoothly. If I don't, and I'm impulsive and I'm blinded by the things that could go wrong, I usually get those and then I react. And then I'm learning from hindsight, not foresight. And so it's wiser to set goals that are balanced than it is to set, quote, positive goals. And many people are caught in this hedonistic fantasy of positive thinking. And as Keogh said in Coca-Cola Company, and who was on Berkshire Hathaway's board, that's probably the most foolish thing you'll do in running big businesses. You need to think about everything that could go wrong and have contingency plans in there. And I learned that from Donald Trump, actually. Because I lived in the same building and I lived underneath him. We would ride the elevator sometimes. And one day we were going down and he had an entourage of a dozen disciples with him. And we walked out the circular door there at the Trump Tower and we walked down to the corner. And as we were listening to their conversation, he had a dozen people thinking of everything that could go wrong with the Hudson River project. And he wanted to make sure they had contingency plans for everything that could go wrong. So if it happened, it wouldn't cost him millions of dollars. So he was foresighting all the things that could go wrong with his objective, not waiting to see, oh, I forgot this, or I forgot that, and reacting. Action is wiser than reaction. Foresight better than hindsight.
So if an individual wants to intentionally construct affirmations, intentionally paint visualizations, it's critical that those visualizations are grounded in an orientation where there's not an expectation to be rid of either support or challenge, that both will exist.
You need it. If an animal is out in the wild and they have no predator and all they have is prey, and the prey is pleasureful because that's something you're going to eat and consume. Predator is painful because it's going to eat you. So one's pleasure, Freud's principle of pleasure and pain, prey and predator. If we go out there as an animal and we have no predator and only prey, we have a very high probability of overeating, consuming, and consuming it in such a way that we actually can mess up the ecosystem. And then we end up having a problem. And because we've gained weight and we're sluggish and can't run fast, we attract predator with more higher probability because they know that they can catch them and they know they get more calories per unit of chomping. And so in the process of doing it, it's wise to have a predator on your case, a competitor we call it, to keep your fitness up, to make sure that you're keeping aware of all the things that could go wrong and all the competitors and everything else to keep you on the edge, to make you resilient and to make sure you're doing micro changes on a regular basis. So businesses must have predator or competitor in that respect. But if you're most authentic and you have an original thing, you have the least impact by the predator, but you need the predator to keep you on your toes. And so
it's like enjoying the jog.
Enjoying the jog, yeah. So that's the thing, because leaders pursue challenges that inspire them. Followers pursue support and then attract challenges that don't.
That's one of my favorite things because upon learning that principle, I went out and immediately selected competitors that I just hold a context of wanting to fucking destroy them. Just to choose them because I know I'm going to have them. So I might as well pick the ones that I think would be most fun or inspiring to go on a jog with.
Well, that's a way of doing it, but the wisest thing to do is to be really clear on your mission and compare your daily actions to your highest priorities. Know that there's competitors, find out where their strengths are, find out where you have the competitive advantage. Your competitive advantage in a country is the greatest resource, but the greatest resource of an individual is their highest value. So finding out what your highest value is and delegating everything else other than that is what gives you the competitive advantage. And getting everybody in your company to do the same is what gives them the competitive advantage.
Yeah, so optimizing that whole pyramid.
Well, the more you're committed to that objective, the more you're going to want to put people in there that will lead to that outcome. Mm-hmm. You're freed by doing it. Your liberty in life and your transcendence to bondage that weighs you down gravitationally, that ages you, is that mastery.
Cool. So, we have 15 minutes. I want to give people something that they can apply to help them establish a discipline in their life. Meditation, I think, is a practice that has the potential to lead people into a greater state of presence and poise. I know you're an avid fan. You've done a lot of it. And if you're still up for that, will you lead for the people through business owners who are, you know who they are. You know how those people are.
Well, I'd like to share what I actually did in my practice. That might be probably the best thing to do, an actual thing that I did.
Yeah.
So would it be wise to address the audience or to...
I don't know. Are they going to be watching or their eyes going to be closed?
They could try with their eyes closed, so I could do it verbally then.
All right.
When I first would go into my office in my high-rise off my second office on the 52nd floor, I would very commonly get there before everybody. And the staff knew that I might be in my own office or in the reception room meditating. And what I would do is I would go first to the front desk and look at who are on the books today. Who am I going to be seeing? And I would close my eyes and I would imagine them in sequence. I try to recreate them and imagine them coming in, and I would go through every single step of what would happen in that day. If I knew they had a birthday, what would I say and do? If I knew they had an anniversary, what would I say and do? If I knew that they had friends and family members, I would know those names. And I would go in there from very start to finish and run through in my mind's eye every single detail of what would going to happen in that day. And go one by one by one by one doing it. I learned that from a guy named Joe Guanera, who used to run marathons and hardly ran. And he would win marathons in his mind. And he hardly went out and ran. It was the most bizarre thing. He used his mind to create the running effect. And so I did that in my practice. And I would literally go through the patients, and I would see in those days around 70 patients in a day. And I would go through and run through the patients one by one. And sometimes I would open my eyes and look at the list and run through who they are and what they would say, what are the obstacles they might run into, what would I do and if they said that, what would I do for referrals, what would I say, how would I engage them in their family, or what advice I would give them. And I would literally run through the day in my mind's eye in 30 minutes. And that 30 minutes, it was almost like I've already done it when they actually came in. And I would run through the scripts of what the staff would say on how to handle objections or handle telephone calls or how to do it. And I would run them in my mind, and sometimes I would type them out and hand them to the staff. But I found that by having foresight and clearly visualizing in my mind's eye the outcome and verbally talking as if I was actually doing it and getting all the senses around it, I could smell, taste, feel, I could hug, I could do everything else. I found it was amazing in getting the outcome. I did this when I worked with sometimes people that were going for gold medals and going for the Olympics or whatever. They were doing gymnastics or running or kite surfing or whatever. If they could see it in their mind's eye, they could create it in reality. It was a cortical response. George Goodhart, who started applied kinesiology, was a mentor of mine when I was around 23, 24. And I lectured with him all the way until I was about 29. And he talked about how powerful it was to be able to see it in your mind's eye, to be able to articulate it so clearly that somebody could see it in their mind's eye. And I have to go off on a tangent. I just thought of something. The greatest visionary person that I've seen do this is a guy named Desmond Brooks. Desmond Brooks, I met on the Gold Coast of Australia at the Versace Hotel at a New Year's evening party. We had dinner with him and his wife. And then he came onto our ship, where I live on a ship, and he came on there and shared with us an amazing story. He said that he's one of the greatest architects. He helped design the Bellagio in Las Vegas for Steve Wynn. But what he did is he envisioned these great edifices, and then he would go to the people that he would like to build them for, and he would ask if he could have just a few minute meeting with them. Have a meeting and have them close their eyes, and then he would take them on a visual odyssey journey of the entire building, every detail of the building, and 2 hours would go by and they'd be in this trance. And he would show them the buildings and everything, walk through it and show them the texture, the walls, the gold, the fabrics, everything, and everything perfectly. And they would turn around and say, whatever you just did, build that. And he went to Ralph Lauren and got a $95 million check to build a palace for him. Versace never intended to build a hotel until they met Desmond Brooks. And Desmond Brooks inspired him to build a hotel, the Versace Hotel on the Gold Coast, because of that vision. So he would take him and literally he would imagine walking up the steps. He could see the actual stone lay. You could see it, and he'd walk into the wood door. You could see the actual grains in the door. You could see the stones on around the door. You could go inside and you walk in, you see the spiraling staircase, you see the chandelier, you see the murals, you see the stonework, you see every single thing, and he would take them through this and go room by room by room through this palace. And Ralph Lauren, in 2 hours, asking for 5 minutes, he gave him 2 hours and kept him in that vision for 2 hours until he saw every part of that palace. And Ralph Lauren said, whatever that is, go build that for me. That's how he marketed himself, by clarity of vision. Anything we live out of our vision is an obstacle and challenge we normally face in our life. And those with a vision flourish. So having a vision is very powerful, and being able to articulate it means it's clear. And if you can't do it, and an affirmation means being firm in one's mind, a condition of firmness in one's mind. Most New Age people think it's all about positive thinking. It's not. It's about having firmness in one's mind, and you don't have a very clear vision unless your executive center's on. And that takes an objective view, and not a positive view, but an objective view that you're inspired by. And that's what a true affirmation really means. To affirm as a prophet in advance, with foresight, what you're creating in the now that's manifesting in time.
Creating this space to explore what's possible for oneself, essentially.
And for the people you care about.
Cool. Thank you for doing this interview. My number 2 podcast. Thank you, Jason. We're filming at Hearth and Home Fireplace. Our lovely host, hanging out back there. We're done. This is it, episode 2. Thank you to myself for doing 2 of these. We'll see if we make it to number 3.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, whatever it is you're doing. We'll see you at the next one. We'll see you at the next one. Done.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Ooh, I'm glad that's on film. That was a powerful job.
Yeah, it was a good setting.
Setting, yeah, Alexander, amazing, man. Thank you for having the vision to create something like this. It's really neat to see come together on this side.
It's pretty cool, right?
Well, hearth has heart in it, right? So it's warm-hearted.
So let me tell a story. We met because we did this. Jason and I met because we rented out this space across the road, which we didn't pay for. And we did a stampede party in this parking lot right out here. Had hay bales and shit. And Brianne, I think, comes over with 13 business cards and loads up lunch for everyone in the building who didn't come out. Like, none of them came out. Funniest thing ever. So we have these 13 business cards. You weren't even there. Wasn't even there that day. And we had these gifts. We had our vendors sponsor it, and we had a couple gifts to give away. And we were like, put your business card in here. It'll be a random draw. And it wasn't random. We dumped out all the business cards, and we placed them all together. And I had been a student of yours for, 3 years at that time. And so Jennifer and I simply got present and got grateful. And we used our intuition to just select 2 cards. Yours was one of them. Wow. Literally used our intuition just to select it. And it was for a jacket that's probably too big for you by 2 sizes. At least. Didn't even fit them right, but it scored me a meeting. And we met at Phil's over there. And I said, so what is it about fireplaces? Like, I was digging for the why. And he, without even a fucking question, he says, fire represents transformation. And I like to bring transformation into the heart of people's homes. I think I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically it.
Have you read Dante's Paradiso?
I haven't.
He was studying Thomas Aquinas's and Aristotle's cosmology and geology. And they believe that the farther you went to the center of the earth, the more gravitational, and the farther you went out, more radiational. And those were in the heavens, and those were in the infernos, the hells. And he said that the highest of heaven he called the Empyrean. And he said the Empyrean was the Pyra meant fire. So Imperium meant it was the highest, most purified state that we could obtain. And the most unpurified state was the center of the earth. It's gravitationally dense. And the more rarefied and more inspired was the rarefied one, the expanded awareness, where you could see the master divine design of the universe. And so Pira, fire, was the key of transformation. Fire raised up, water boiled down.
So I said, we're going to be friends.
And you are a gift to me, for sure, man.
Yeah, this was fun. One of our values at Measurable Genius is to embody incremental progress. So, you know, I started with lights and an iPhone. Or whatever. Just an iPhone. Just an iPhone. Lights and an iPhone. It's fun. It's cool. It's cool to see what you can create with this shit. And people love it. They just love to... It's like a little looking glass into someone else's life. You know, Gary Vaynerchuk has done 100 episodes of Daily V, which is just 15 to 30 minutes of a camera following him around all day. And from the perspective of the Demartini method and owning traits, I think that there's like this subtext where we all intuitively know that we will learn more about ourselves and unlock potential by seeing and owning the traits of others, right? I mean, Tony Robbins calls it modeling or whatever, and there's different ways to approach that. But, you know, it's true. Like, that's why I wanted this and everything else that we produce to be as close to our real execution and operation as possible, and as close to as real as who I am as possible, because then I think that we have a greater chance of scaling up. The first quote in the book says, "Don't bother trying to teach people shit, give them a tool or show them a way that they can follow and they'll think differerly."
Scaling Up is a great book.
Yeah?
I found that was one of the better books I've read.
Cool, right? The Rockefeller Habits, that checklist.
Yeah, there's some great wisdom in that book.
Told you.
Working on it.
I'm selling all my clients on that book.
Well, it's a worthy read.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we go?